Imagine being castrated as a young boy. Welcome to the History Deep Dive, where we uncover the astonishing truths of the past. Today, we're delving into one of the Roman Empire's most unsettling chapters. Truly bizarre, devastating. It's the story of Emperor Nero and a young man named Sporus. Sporus's life was twisted into something unrecognizable by, well, imperial obsession and profound grief. This isn't just a tale of ancient power. It's a haunting look at how one man's unchecked desires absolutely shattered another's very existence. It leaves this chilling mark on history. When we think of Emperor Nero, usually this image of tyranny and pure excess comes to mind, right? But he didn't exactly start out that way. So let's unpack this. How did a ruler begin with so much public goodwill, honestly, only to descend into such dark, really erratic behavior? What was the initial public perception of Emperor Nero when he first took the throne?
It's actually fascinating when you look into Nero's early years, because his rise to power in 54 AD, he was only 16,
16, wow.
Yeah, just 16. And it genuinely sparked this wave of optimism across Rome. People were, frankly, tired of all the intrigue and bloodshed that often came with emperors changing. They saw him as this harbinger of a new era, peaceful, prosperous.
So there was real hope there.
Oh, absolutely. A palpable sense of hope. And he immediately did things that kind of cemented this positive image. He showed a pretty shrewd understanding of public feeling.
Like what specifically?
Well, first off, he significantly cut taxes, which, as you can imagine, earned him huge popularity, especially with the merchant class and the everyday folks, the plebeians, who felt that economic burden the most.
Okay, tax cuts are always popular. But it wasn't just that, was it? You said he was investing in public morale?
Exactly. Beyond just the money stuff, he heavily funded, and this is key, he personally participated in massive public entertainment.
Right, the bread and circuses idea.
Sort of, but more involved. We're talking lavish gladiatorial games, really elaborate theater shows, thrilling chariot races, kept people engaged, distracted. But what really set him apart, and what initially charmed a lot of people, was his artistic side, his flair.
He wasn't just paying for it, he was doing it.
Yes, he would sing, he played the lyre, he even acted on stage for the public. Now, this was highly unusual for an emperor. Really broke the mold.
I bet. Made him seem more human.
Exactly. Approachable, cultured, almost like one of the people. He projected this image of a benevolent patron, a gifted artist, very different from the cold, distant rulers they might have known before. This period, honestly, was marked by genuine public affection for him.
That's such a stark contrast to the Nero we usually hear about, the tyrants. So what was the turning point? How does this promising young emperor morph into the figure history remembers? When did that shift really start?
Well, that initial wave of goodwill, it really started to unravel around 65 AD, so about a decade into his reign.
10 years is a long time to stay popular, I suppose.
It is. But what we see here is the effect of absolute power. Unchecked, unchallenged power. It just had this deeply corrosive effect on his character. It wasn't slow. It was a profound transformation of his psyche, almost like alchemy, but, dark.
How did that manifest? What changed in him?
He became consumed by this escalating paranoia, a gnawing suspicion that everyone, even his closest advisors, his family, was conspiring against him.
That sounds exhausting.
And terrifying for those around him. This paranoia was coupled with this insatiable craving for adoration. He didn't just want respect or loyalty, he demanded worship. He needed to be seen as this divine talent, an unparalleled artist god almost.
And underneath all that demand for adoration, what was driving it?
Well, what seems clear is that beneath this grandiosity, there was this profound, almost desperate loneliness. It really twisted his mind.
Loneliness as the emperor.
The isolation of absolute power, the constant fear of betrayal, maybe losing any genuine connection he might have had. It pushed him towards increasingly extreme indulgence and tragically outright cruelty.
So people became objects to him.
Pretty much. He started seeing human lives not as individuals with inherent worth, but as instruments or playthings, things to satisfy his volatile desires, his unstable emotions. The mask of the charming performer slipped, and what was underneath was deeply unstable, increasingly dangerous, a mind losing its grip on reality, caught in its own delusions.
And this wasn't just political then, it was psychological.
Absolutely. A psychological unraveling with truly horrifying consequences down the line.
It really sounds like a deeply unsettling path he was on. And right in the middle of this downward spiral, this key figure emerges, Poppaea Sabina. Tell us about her. What made her so vital to Nero? How did she change his world?
Papa, she was. Well, she was extraordinary. Incredibly beautiful, yes, but also sharp, intelligent, and fiercely ambitious.
The whole package, it sounds like.
In many ways, she was everything Nero seemed to desire in a partner, almost a perfect reflection of his own ego, his own dramatic flair. She was a stark contrast to his first wife, Octavia.
Octavia, daughter of Emperor Claudius.
Right. That's the one. Octavia was seen as, well, politically useful, but rather cold. Frankly, dull to Nero's artistic temperament. Poppaea, on the other hand, vivacious, incredibly smart, exquisitely fashionable. She had this commanding presence that just captivated him completely.
So instant attraction.
More than attraction, obsession. She didn't just light up a room, she held Nero spellbound.
Their relationship must have caused quite a stir in Rome. Emperors having affairs wasn't new, but this sounds different.
Oh, it definitely did. Their affair became an open scandal. Whispers, condemnation from the traditional Roman aristocracy, all through the empire. But Nero, he was utterly consumed by her. His obsession was total.
So much so that
He took the drastic, hugely unpopular step of divorcing Octavia.
Yeah.
And this wasn't just personal, it was a massive political move. It alienated a lot of allies, a lot of the public who sympathized with Octavia.
And what happened to Octavia?
To remove all obstacles,
Yeah.
she was later executed on fabricated charges of adultery. A ruthless move. Really shows how far Nero would go. Very Julio-Claudian, unfortunately.
Grim. So then he married Poppaea.
Yes. In this lavish imperial spectacle, spared no expense, proclaimed his devotion, elevated her to empress. And she wielded that influence, believe me.
You keep using the word obsession for Nero's feelings about Poppaea. Was it really love? Or something darker, more controlling?
I think it was a chilling form of possessive ownership. A dark imitation of love, maybe.
How so?
Well, he showered her with immense wealth, absolutely. Gems from far-off lands, statues sculpted in her likeness everywhere, even designed an entire palace just for her. But
There's always a but with Nero, isn't there?
it seems so. This adoration came hand in hand with his intense, suffocating need for control. He had spies watching her, constantly monitoring her every move. He was consumed by this paralyzing fear of losing her, or maybe being betrayed by her.
That doesn't sound like love. It sounds like paranoia extending to her, too.
Exactly. Some accounts say he'd spend hours just observing her, almost like she was this beautiful, rare object existing only for his pleasure, his validation. It wasn't healthy affection. He blurred the line between devotion and absolute possession. She wasn't an individual to him in the end. She was an extension of his own volatile desires, a trophy he had to guard.
And then the unthinkable happened. She died. Violently. Ripped from his life by his own hand. What exactly happened? And what was Nero's reaction to this loss, this act he committed?
This is where the story takes a truly shocking turn. It gets much, much darker. It's 65 AD. Poppaea is heavily pregnant with their second child, and she dares to challenge Nero.
About what?
The historical accounts vary a bit on the specifics. Maybe it was about his scandalous public performances, which she apparently disapproved of, or his late-night carousing, maybe even a political decision she disagreed with. We don't know the exact trigger.
But she challenged him.
She pushed too far, challenged his absolute authority, and in a fit of uncontrollable imperial rage, Nero struck her violently.
He hit her while she was pregnant.
Some accounts describe a single, devastating kick to her abdomen. Others claim it was a more savage beating. But the result, tragically, the result was the same. Poppaea collapsed, bleeding, broken. She died within hours, along with their unborn child.
My God. The sheer brutality from the man who supposedly adored her.
It's almost beyond comprehension, the ultimate betrayal of whatever twisted devotion he felt.
So how did Nero react? The man who just killed his pregnant wife in a fit of rage. Was there remorse? Or did the madness just deepen?
His reaction wasn't remorse. It was profound madness, a complete, terrifying detachment from reality.
What did he do?
He reportedly threw himself onto her lifeless body, weeping uncontrollably, screaming her name, even commanding her to live as if his imperial power could somehow defy death itself.
Delusion on a grand scale.
Absolutely. He summoned the best physicians in Rome, offered them immense wealth, threatened unspeakable tortures if they failed to revive her. But it was, of course, far too late. She was gone. The baby was gone.
So denial then.
Total denial.
Yeah.
In his delusion, Nero refused to cremate her body, which was the Roman custom, right? Instead, he chose to have it embalmed, lavishly. Exotic spices, perfumes, a practice usually reserved for, like, Egyptian royalty.
Keeping her physically present.
And then he declared her divine. Built her this grand mausoleum, more elaborate than any emperor's tomb before, established this bizarre, almost cult-like worship in her honor.
It gets weirder, doesn't it?
Oh, yes. For 4 agonizing months, he refused to accept her death. He spoke to her corpse, as if she could still hear him, held these one-sided conversations.
No.
Yes, and he even kept her place, meticulously set at banquets, forced his terrified courtiers, everyone around him, to pretend she was still alive, to speak of her in the present tense.
That's theater of the macabre, forcing everyone into his delusion.
Exactly. It was a grotesque display, a broken mind desperately trying to defy reality, trapping everyone around him in this waking nightmare.
That paints such a disturbing picture. A man spiraling completely. So how does Sporus, this young boy, suddenly enter this scene of deep, twisted grief and imperial madness, and what horrifying fate awaited him because he looked like the dead empress?
It was right in this period, this delusional grief, this desperate, unhinged search for a way to undo what couldn't be undone. That's when Nero discovered Sporus.
Who was he? Just some random boy?
He was a teenager, likely no older than 14 or 15. He was a palace-raised freedman.
A freedman, so technically free.
Technically, yes, but his entire existence was dependent on imperial favor, on Nero's whims, left him utterly vulnerable. And what caught Nero's eye wasn't Sporus' personality or skills.
It was his face.
It was a striking, almost eerie physical resemblance to Poppaea Sabina. Ancient accounts confirm this. Sporus had delicate features, these expressive, captivating eyes, a refined jawline. It uncannily mirrored the late empress.
Seeing a ghost. For Nero, in that state, it must have been intense. What did he make of it? Just a coincidence?
Oh, to Nero, in his grief-fueled madness. This was not a coincidence. It was like Poppaea had literally returned. He saw it as a sign, a divine opportunity to undo the past, to bring his lost love back to life through this living embodiment.
Sporus was a boy.
And the truly shocking part is that the fact Sporus was male was, to Nero's twisted mind, just a minor detail, a technicality, something that could be fixed.
Fixed. Oh, no.
Became fixated on this grotesque idea. Saw Sporus not as a person, not as a boy with his own life, his own identity, but as a vessel, a blank canvas to project the idealized image of his dead wife onto.
That's not admiration. That's something else entirely.
It was a desperate, horrific attempt at resurrection by manipulating another human being, a complete disregard for Sporus' humanity, reducing him to an object in Nero's delusion.
You said Nero thought Sporus being male could be fixed. What did that mean for Sporus? How did Nero try to fix it? What was the impact?
This is truly where the story descends into profound, unspeakable horror. It reveals the absolute depths of Nero's depravity. Nero ordered the impossible, the unthinkable.
What?
Sporus was to be surgically altered, castrated,
Yep.
mutilated.
No.
Yes. This brutal, irreversible act, performed by palace physicians, not for any medical reason, obviously, purely to satisfy Nero's deranged fantasy.
I can't even imagine.
Imagine the agonizing pain, the terror. In ancient Rome, no real anesthesia, maybe some herbs that barely dulled the horror. This act stripped Sporus not just of his physical manhood, the essence of his male being, but it also meant he could never father children. Trapped him forever in someone else's image.
His body, physically altered to fit a delusion.
His body, his identity, fundamentally changed. A complete systematic erasure of who he was. The screams, if he could scream, swallowed by the palace walls. His suffering, completely insignificant next to the emperor's absolute desire. It was a deliberate, violent act of unmaking a human being.
After this horrific mutilation, this unmaking of Sporus, what happened then? How was he further transformed into this living empress, this ghost made flesh? And how on earth did Rome react to this grotesque public display?
The physical alteration, horrific as it was only the beginning. It was the start of Sporus' complete transformation into a living empress, a living doll for Nero.
How? What else did they do?
A whole new wardrobe was made, meticulously crafted, dresses modeled directly on Poppaea's own clothes, designed not just to fit his altered body, but to hide any remaining masculine features.
So forced into women's clothing.
Constantly. He was adorned with makeup, trained how to use cosmetics to look more feminine, draped in glittering jewels, many of which had actually belonged to Poppaea. Constant reminder.
Her jewels on him.
His hair was styled in these elaborate ways favored by Roman noblewomen. His voice. They painstakingly retrained his voice to sound higher, more feminine. His posture was corrected, taught to move like a Roman lady.
Every single detail.
Twisted into Nero's grotesque fantasy. He wasn't Sporus anymore. He was given a new name, Sabina, after Nero's dead wife. A chilling, constant reminder of whose ghost he was supposed to be.
And this wasn't kept private, was it? Nero actually made this public, took it to an extreme level.
That's what makes this even more shocking.
Yeah.
It cements it as one of the most bizarre events in Roman history. In the spring of 67 AD, Nero makes his public, audacious announcement. He was marrying Sporus.
Marrying him?
and a full traditional imperial wedding ceremony.
Yeah.
The palace decorated, musicians, Roman nobles, senators, everyone gathered.
A wedding?
A lavish event, complete with Roman rituals, vows exchanged, public applause. And there was Sporus, now Sabina, standing by Nero's side as his lawfully wedded bride. Nero played the part of the devoted groom, parading his living ghost down the aisle for all of Rome to see, a grotesque performance for the whole empire.
How did Rome react? A city used to imperial weirdness, but this must have crossed a line.
Rome watched, in this mixture of horrified disbelief, morbid fascination, and probably a lot of silent condemnation.
It wasn't just the same-sex aspect then. Rome had seen various things.
Exactly. It wasn't just the gender of the bride that shocked them. Same-sex relationships weren't totally unknown in certain contexts. What truly horrified them was the truth behind it. This wasn't love. It wasn't even simple perversion.
What was it then, in their eyes?
It was, as some ancient writers described it, like necromancy of the living. A boy, brutally mutilated, stripped of his identity, psychologically tortured, forced into a dead woman's place, remade into a living doll to soothe a madman's grief.
So people knew the background, the castration.
The whispers must have flown. People knew. They whispered. Maybe some laughed nervously, others definitely shuddered with disgust. But openly defy Nero, no one dared. Not when fire, poison, forced suicide were the likely results.
So Sporus became a public spectacle.
A living, breathing symbol of Nero's unchecked madness. And maybe the empire's moral decay. His very existence was a public degradation.
So after this grotesque wedding, Sporus's life is completely redefined. How did he even navigate that? What was his daily reality like, living as an empress, trapped in this gilded but soul-crushing cage?
From that day forward, Sporus lived, well, not as a person, but as this haunting echo, a ghost made real. His entire existence became a constant, terrifying performance. He had to sit beside Nero at every formal dinner, every public reception, every imperial audience, meticulously dressed as the empress. He had to pretend to remember conversations he never had, respond to memories that weren't his, feign recognition of people he'd never met.
All while acting like Poppaea.
Maintaining her exact demeanor, her voice, her gestures, smiling, nodding, laughing in the precise way of someone who didn't exist anymore. Never daring to deviate from the script Nero's delusion had written.
The psychological pressure.
Imagine waking up every day in rooms designed to mimic Poppaea's, seeing a stranger in the mirror, wearing her jewels, living a life built entirely on someone else's memories. The toll must have been just devastating, beyond measure.
And any mistake, any slip,
could risk awakening Nero's violent, unpredictable fury. Any moment of perceived imperfection in the performance.
punishment.
This sounds like a relentless nightmare. Did it extend beyond the palace? Did Nero force him to keep up this illusion in public, even outside Rome? Oh, absolutely. Nero clung to this fantasy with his unyielding grip, projected it onto the whole empire, even beyond its borders.
Like when?
When he went on his grand tour of Greece in 67 AD, he was eager to compete in music festivals, artistic competitions, which was already seen as pretty undignified for an emperor.
Right, the performer emperor.
And Sporus went with him, presented to foreign dignitaries, local aristocrats, the Greek crowds, as the Empress of Rome.
How must that have looked to outsiders?
Shocking. Bewildering. A macabre charade. Nero would openly brag about his wife, force foreign rulers, noblemen to bow to this illusion, treating Sporus as if he was Poppaea returned, never acknowledging the nightmare he'd created for this young man.
So Sporus had to maintain the act constantly, even abroad.
These journeys must have been incredibly harrowing for him. Forced to keep up the feminine persona, respond to Poppaea's name, in unfamiliar places, surrounded by strangers who either believed it or pretended to out of fear. The contrast is just jarring. Nero chasing artistic glory while his wife endured silent suffering.
And behind the public mask, what was the private torment like? Alone with Nero, it must have been even darker.
Behind closed doors,
Yeah.
even darker, far more volatile. Nero's possessive obsession grew increasingly unpredictable, fueled by his own instability.
Yeah.
He'd lash out. Fits of uncontrollable rage if Sporus failed to perfectly embody Poppaea's memory. Punishing him for tiny deviations, imagine slights that only existed in Nero's disturbed mind. These outbursts could be terrifying, physically brutal.
Yep.
Then in these twisted moments of intense, almost childlike affection, Nero would shower him with gifts, lavish gifts, estates, precious jewels, slaves, speak softly to him as if Poppea really was back and being pampered.
That cycle, abuse and reward, it's classic psychological torture.
Absolutely. A relentless, devastating cycle. Sporus was trapped, a psychological prisoner in this gilded cage. His mind had no escape. He was this fragile construct built on the ruins of his own identity. No respite, no hope of escape from the fantasy of the most powerful man in the world. Constant fear, walking a tightrope between adoration and violence.
Even empires ruled by madmen eventually crumble. What happened when Nero started to fall apart? And the big question, did Sporus finally find freedom after Nero died? Or was the nightmare just evolving?
By 68 AD, rebellion finally broke out, widespread. Nero's excesses, his paranoia-driven executions of senators, military leaders, his tyranny, it had finally alienated everyone who mattered. The legions, the elite.
So the Senate acted.
They seized the opportunity, boldly declared him a traitor, a public enemy, which basically stripped him of all rights, condemned him to death. As the empire turned, Nero fled Rome, with just a handful of loyalists.
And Sporus.
Even in that final desperate flight, as his world collapsed, Nero clung to his creation. Sporus was one of the very few who went with him.
And Nero's end.
Ultimately, his personal secretary, Epaphroditus, helped him take his own life. June 68 AD. That was the end of the Julio-Claudian dynasty. Dramatic finality.
So Nero's gone. Finally, that must have been the end of the nightmare for Sporus, right? Freedom, reclaiming his identity.
What's deeply, incredibly shocking and just tragic is that Nero's death brought Sporus no liberation, no freedom at all.
What? Why not?
Instead, in the chaos after Nero, Sporus became a possession, an infamous living trophy, to be claimed by others scrambling for power in Rome's treacherous political games.
Passed around.
The empire plunged into civil war, the year of the four emperors, and general after general seeking legitimacy, or maybe just morbid curiosity, took custody of him.
Oh my God, who?
First, Nymphidius Sabinus, commander of the Praetorian Guard. He seized him, called him Poppea, planned to marry him too, treated him like this prized relic of Nero's decadence.
Another marriage.
Thankfully, Sabinus fell quickly. Then Otho took custody. And get this, Otho had actually been the real Poppea's first husband before Nero took her.
That's twistedly ironic. How did Otho treat him?
Reports say with a strange, almost melancholic gentleness. Maybe some weird homage to the memory of the woman they were both tied to by Nero's whims, but
He still wasn't free.
no. Regardless of the treatment, each successor forced Sporus to remain in character, dressed as Poppaea, called by her name. A human trophy passed from hand to hand, still playing the same tragic, identity-erasing role.
His identity was just gone. Absorbed by Nero's madness, even after Nero was dead.
He wasn't released. He was inherited. A ghostly reminder of a madman's reign.
After enduring so much, the mutilation being this living trophy constantly reminded of his torment. What was the final act of degradation Sporus faced? And how did he finally respond to this unbearable, seemingly endless fate?
Under the next emperor, Vitellius, who won the civil war for a time, Sporus faced the ultimate horror. The final, unimaginable degradation.
What could be worse?
Vitellius was known for his vulgarity, his love for brutal entertainment. He planned this public spectacle in the Colosseum for mass amusement.
A spectacle involving Sporus.
A grotesque reenactment of a Greek myth, the rape of Persephone. And Sporus was to be forced to play the role of the violated maiden.
Publicly.
In the Colosseum, publicly humiliated, subjected to simulated sexual assault, violent abuse before thousands of jeering spectators. A planned theatrical rape, basically. Staged for public amusement, maybe to show Vitellius's power through cruelty. For Sporus, who had endured years of forced feminization, psychological torture, this was the absolute abyss. Dehumanization taken to its extreme.
After years of suffering, the erasure of his identity, facing this ultimate public humiliation, what did Sporus do? How did he react?
Faced with this unbearable final degradation, with no hope left of freedom, of reclaiming any part of himself, Sporus made his final, most powerful choice.
What was it?
He decided no more. He took his own life, most likely by poison. He was incredibly young, probably no older than 20.
20 years old.
This act, it was far more than just an escape from the immediate horror. It was a profound, final, desperately powerful reclamation of dignity, of agency.
His last act of control.
For years, others had dictated who he was, what he wore, how he spoke, how he would be used. In choosing death on his own terms, refusing to participate in that last public humiliation, Sporus reclaimed the only thing he had left: control over his own fate. He asserted his fundamental humanity in the face of absolute dehumanization. It was his last defiant no.
Sporus' story is just heartbreaking, a truly harrowing tale of unchecked power, unimaginable suffering. What can we really learn from his life, his tragic end? Why is it important we remember him today?
Sporce's story is definitely not just some weird footnote in the history of a mad emperor. It stands as this chilling, profound testament to what happens when absolute power goes entirely unchecked, when personal grief curdles into this grotesque form of ownership, when a person's identity is systematically brutally devoured for someone else's fantasy.
He really exposed the dark side of Rome, didn't he?
Absolutely. His very existence exposed the truly grotesque underbelly of imperial Rome, a world where human lives could be treated as toys, bent, reshaped, utterly destroyed at the whim of an emperor.
And what do you think he embodied about the empire itself?
He embodied this profound perversion of empire, in a way. Beauty without consent, power used to crush identity, a twisted love completely devoid of humanity. But despite everything, the systematic erasure of his identity, the body altered, name changed, life forced into a performance, his final act, choosing death. That was a powerful assertion of his fundamental humanity, a refusal to be completely broken. That final, defiant no echoed, even if silently.
So his story, though often silenced in the big historical narratives, carries a lasting message for us.
I think so. His silence across the centuries, in a way, speaks louder than Nero's madness ever could. It's this stark, timeless accusation against any system, any unchecked authority that values power over personhood, control over human dignity.
A warning, almost.
A haunting reminder, definitely, that even in the darkest corners of history, where people are systematically oppressed, dehumanized, that fundamental human desire for dignity, for choice, still survives. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths, doesn't it? About power, the fragility of identity, and the astonishing resilience of the human spirit, even when facing unspeakable cruelty.
It really does. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What silent battles for dignity are being fought right now in the shadows of power that history might never fully record? Thank you so much for listening. Please like, share, subscribe, and as always, have a nice day or a good night and stay safe. See you on the next one.